So happy Data Privacy Week, everybody. I'm Scott Seaborn. I'm the Campus Privacy Officer here at UC Berkeley. I'm very happy you could join us, and I'm really excited about our panel today. We're going to talk about how we can make the privacy field more accessible to young professionals, mid-career professionals, and especially for persons of color. The field itself is growing exponentially. Those of you who are joining this call have an interest in privacy, and that's a good thing, because the number of organizations, whether they're universities, private sector companies, municipalities, state and local governments, that are building out privacy programs has grown exponentially in the past 5 to 10 years. And we're going to talk about that a little bit and how we can bridge the gap between the positions that exist and the individuals who are interested in privacy. I'll give you an example. Here at UC Berkeley, we have a privacy position that has been open for 4 months. We only had one applicant. So there's obviously something wrong with how we're doing this. So I'm going to turn it over to Van Williams. Van is the Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer at the University of California. We're very excited to have Van with us. And Van will share a little bit about his background and professional experience, and then he'll introduce the panel.
I'm thrilled to be here, Scott, and I'm thrilled that you all actually made it today. I'm hoping that when you walk away, you'll kind of walk away with 2 things. One, knowing that whether or not you intended or not, we're all basically responsible for data privacy. And then number 2, that you'll kind of walk away feeling even more excited and having some idea about how to be able to pursue this career. My background is not in data privacy. I started off my career building out database systems. I've moved into software engineering, network administration, system administration, and solution architecture. And through all the technical parts of my career, one thing that's actually kind of been, a key part of that is that I've been responsible in some way, shape, or form of making sure that data has been secure and that it's actually kept private. And as I've moved into the broader part of my career, which has been in the management side, so much of the conversations have continually basically been about keeping data private. That's kind of engaging with everybody from the academic side in terms of teaching and making sure that there's privacy of student information, as well as in terms of research and making sure that there's good privacy built into these agreements that we have from research and research data sharing. My hope is that you actually kind of understand that coming from me, I don't have a law degree. I have no privacy certifications, but I find myself consistently in these conversations that anybody can actually get here. And there's lots of different pathways to get here. We do have some real privacy people that's joining us today. You'll get a chance to hear from Liz Eraker Palley, who's a senior privacy counsel at Google. My friend and colleague, Cheryl Washington, who's the chief information security officer at UC Davis, and also a former privacy officer at the Office of the President. We also have Pegah Parsi, the chief privacy officer over at UC San Diego. And then finally, Thea Bullock, who's the chief privacy officer at UC Irvine. I'm really looking forward to this panel with them. And I think I'll turn it over to start with Liz.
Thanks, Van and Scott, for organizing this panel on such an important topic, and happy Data Privacy Day to everyone. So like Van said, I'm a privacy lawyer at Google. As an undergrad, I studied history and economics. Didn't focus really on privacy issues. In terms of my career path, I initially started out doing some public policy work, thought I wanted to go into law school, so took a job at Google, initially working as a legal assistant, and started doing that at a time that lots of really interesting public policy issues related to the internet were kind of front and center in public debates. And so I had the opportunity to actually work out in DC with the company for a couple of years doing government relations work. So took that, kind of further delayed law school, but then decided that I did want to actually pursue kind of legal studies. So came back to the West Coast, and I'm a Berkeley alum. So went to Berkeley for law school. And it was really there that I solidified my interest in privacy issues. So had a lot of really great experiences to kind of build, get exposure to the field and kind of build experience in the space, from working in a clinic. I had an opportunity to work out in DC during my summers as a law clerk with the FTC, with the House Energy and Commerce Committee, focused on internet policy issues, including some consumer privacy issues. I had a chance to take a few different classes focused on privacy issues with some really great professors. Did a summer associate at a law firm, so kind of had exposure from like different areas to the privacy space. My path is a bit unusual in that coming out of law school, I actually came straight back in-house, back to Google, initially doing work as a policy counsel actually out in DC. And then decided that I was really interested in getting kind of more traditional in-house experience. So moved over to our privacy legal team about 9 years ago. And I currently manage a team of lawyers that are focused on privacy governance issues. So that includes things like advising the company on compliance with legal commitments, working on things like our risk assessments, and generally the operation of our privacy compliance program. Really, the field is super important, something that touches all of our lives. And there's lots of different ways to kind of impact and make a difference in this area. So looking forward to chatting more through these issues.
Can we turn it over to Pegah? Would you mind introducing yourself and sharing your background?
Sure. Hey, everybody. As you heard, my name is Pegah Parsi. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer at UC San Diego. I started out at a time where privacy wasn't really even a thing you could study in school, right? It wasn't it still isn't, right? There's not like a major called privacy. So I didn't know it was a field. I didn't know it was a career thing that people go into. I went to school and studied philosophy, political science, and English. And I wanted to go to law school, which is not, in fact, a pattern you're going to see here today on this panel. I think there's just two of us. And I want to dispel any myths that you may have heard already. You absolutely do not have to go to law school to work in privacy. Let me just put that out there. It just happens that the first two people that you're hearing from did go to law school. So anyway, I went to law school and business school after college because I wanted to work in human rights. That was sort of my passion. I was very idealistic, wanted to do good in the world. But I graduated right at the time of the Great Recession. So job prospects were very low, just nothing good was happening at that time from an employment perspective. And so I kept, you have to pay the bills. So you find a job, you hang out in it. And I happened to work in university administration, which I did, but it wasn't really my passion. Very, very important work, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the thing that kept me, excited to get up out of bed every day. But at one time, I was a research contracts and grants person, so I'm a recovering contract officer. But I was seeing a lot more privacy and security terms come up in our contract language, right, when I was negotiating them. And I'm reasonably intelligent. I'm resourceful. I can go look things up, but privacy laws are just not that way that you can just look them up and say, yes, we'll agree to this. This sounds good. There's a lot of compliance pieces, a lot of policy pieces, a lot of things that you need to know about. And I didn't. So I kept asking those questions. I kept saying, I don't know, does our university have this policy? Can we comply with this? What does this even mean? And I think, as Thea will tell you, if you just become a thorn in somebody's side and ask a bunch of questions and show that you're curious, show that you're interested in a subject, they're going to get annoyed with you and say, you go do it. You go figure it out. You learn it. You volunteered yourself. And that's kind of what happened to me. Was I asked too many privacy questions and they said, why don't you go and hang out in the privacy office and learn it and come back and teach us? And the rest is history. I went there, I cut my teeth. I was at Stanford at the time. I cut my teeth doing privacy compliance work until it became very, very clear to me that privacy and our data issues that we have right now are sort of the next great civil liberties and civil rights and human rights issue of our time. And so somehow I kind of, in a backwards way, ended up exactly where I was supposed to be, and sort of what I went to law school for, and that passion that I had somehow in a circular way came to fruition. So I'm here for any of you that might be kind of bored with whatever you're doing or things aren't igniting your passion. I'm your person to tell you to go forth and find your way. Next.
Thanks, Pegah. Thea?
Hello, everyone. I'm Thea Bullock, and I like to call myself the accidental privacy official because I'm one of these people that privacy found me mid-career. I have my degree in molecular biology from Cal, so you don't have to be a law school grad, that's for sure. And I spent 26 years working at the county health department. And as a molecular biology grad, I got a lot of experience working my way through the health department. And we did really interesting epidemiological investigations, restaurant inspections, hazmat enforcement, policy and planning. Being curious is really important to get you in the door. Because as I was working my way through the health department, I was learning and picking up skills that are very, very useful. So eventually, as I was asking questions and wandering through the health department for 26 years, I ended up in the compliance office. And I'm one of the original privacy officers from back in the day. So when I joined the compliance office, HIPAA was new. HIPAA was a new law and it wasn't even enforceable yet. So I got in on the ground floor. So back when I joined, HIPAA privacy officials were not a recognized profession. There were records managers, nurses, pharmacists, and admin people. So you could have any type of background as long as you were willing to open up the book, learn the process, and then find places to get that certification. So in healthcare, it's very robust now. If that's your area of interest, you have the Healthcare Compliance Association, where with any kind of education, you could jump in, get a certification, and that helps you get in the door for healthcare privacy and healthcare compliance. But in my case, it was by accident. I was wandering through the health department and I had a little bit of occupational ADD that came from curiosity. I wanted to learn more and learn different aspects of operations. And one of my recommendations for people who are interested in, find an industry that you want to work in. All privacy is not the same. Data privacy for tech is different than healthcare privacy, is different than educational privacy, is different than retail privacy. But find something that you're interested in, because if you love it and you care about it, it's so much easier to find your way through. Now, I was just a curious person. I asked questions, and mid-career, I became the HIPAA privacy official and realized I had to learn things. So that's when I found Healthcare Compliance Association, took these tests, read up, and built a network of professionals and contemporaries that I can go ask, and I can ask them for questions and help. Now, in county government, you're one of one. You are the only privacy official for your county. So we started contacting other counties to build our own network. When you're starting out as a new privacy analyst, go out and build your own network. Find people who are in the business, near the business, and I think that's a good way to get there. And accidental privacy official found out that it's interesting and it's a good job. I came to the UC after 26 years in the county and realized now I have to learn all about higher education. But I have these wonderful colleagues at the other campuses that have been helping me along, and I'm only 3 years into this process. So I'm new in higher education, but I can tell you that this industry is full of people that care, and all of us are really, really excited about advocating for our individuals' right an individual's right to control their information. And we really want to send the message, if we're collecting information about people and saving it and using it, it should benefit the individual. We should be doing something good for them that's helpful to them. Otherwise, we shouldn't have that information. Let's not keep it, and then we don't have to protect it, and there isn't the risk of losing it or something bad happening to it. So as you can tell, I'm a very plain speaking, all around generalist that lives in a privacy profession. So that's how I ended up here. And that's my approach to privacy as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Thea. And Cheryl, you got the last word.
Wow, I am Cheryl Washington. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for UC Davis. So I was listening to my colleagues talk about their journey. I kept saying, yeah, me too. There's a lot of similarities between my entry into the privacy world and what you've already heard. But let's take a step back. I've been a security officer for many years. And much like Thea, I fell into the role. In fact, to be perfectly blunt, it was more like tag, you're it. And that happened a lot to many of us back in the early days. Much like Van, before I entered the privacy and security world, I was actually more of a tech head. I spent a lot of years deploying, managing, developing systems. And interesting, at that time, I did not make the connection that what I was really doing was trying to put in place the appropriate controls and processes to manage data about people who care about their data. And I was working at these very large institutions, and while Thea is correct that we had privacy laws on the books, they just weren't enforced or enforceable or meaningful. I do want to suggest that at that time, even those of us who were working not in a privacy or security arena really were focused on managing data. And so that was really my first entry into my orientation in the privacy field. I was more of a data manager, a data analyst. Fast forward. At one point, I had deployed my last wave of systems, an HR system, a payroll system, financial system, a workers' comp system. And what do many of these systems have in common? Really personal, sensitive information about people. Not realizing how much value we had at our hands, we really had to struggle because there weren't very many privacy laws on the books. We had to struggle to figure out what is the appropriate path forward. Thea is absolutely correct. What we didn't want to do was collect information unnecessarily. What we didn't want to do was collect information and not have the appropriate protections in place. And so much like the colleagues who've already spoken, I had to figure out a path forward to not only manage the data, but manage the data securely with the idea that privacy would be top of mind. Again, fast forward. At one point, I left that organization and became the system-wide CISO for the California State University system. 23 campuses, a very large system of higher education. And what we're now talking about is a huge number, a huge swath of institutions, data, systems, people. And even as a system-wide CISO, I had to think my way through, how do we protect all this information that we're now stewards of? So I began my journey of study. There weren't a lot of playbooks out there. There were some associations, there were some networks, but much like what you've heard so far, you had to take the impetus on yourself to go out and learn quickly. And I have to admit, there were occasions I made mistakes. I'm not perfect, but what I ended up doing is learning from those mistakes and certainly collaborating with others to figure out the most appropriate path forward. So let's pivot again. I left the CSU and became what was quite interesting, the CISO and the Chief Privacy Officer for the University of California system. UC thought it would be a fantastic idea to marry both privacy and security into one role and assign that one role to one person. Yes, it didn't take long for me to realize, nice idea, not the best approach. What I think UC was aspiring to do was really to join these two different branches, privacy and security. Again, a good idea, but putting those two branches into the head and hearts and minds of one person, probably not the best approach forward. Needless to say, UC got smart fast and decided to break up the role. We have a chief privacy officer, we have a chief security officer, but what we also have, which I think is extraordinarily important, and something that I don't think UC says enough, is this relationship between privacy and security. Today, I am the security officer for the University of California at Davis. However, even as a CISO, I do not lose sight of the importance of privacy and the importance of engagement with the privacy officers and other stakeholders who also have privacy top of mind. As a person of color entering to this field, one thing I would suggest to any of you who are very interested in this field, and I think it's a fantastic field, it's very exciting. If you haven't picked up the message by now, this is one of the few fields where it's not overly prescriptive. There's still a lot of work for us to do. There's a lot of things for us to learn, a lot of things for us to figure out. And for me, that's extraordinarily exciting to be part of that community, that group, that network of people who are finding that path forward. One thing I would strongly advise any of you who are interested in this field, even if you're just slightly interested, is to pick up the phone or send an email to any one of us. Let's talk. I happen to be a very strong proponent of mentorship or mentoring. And one of the things that really helped me as I was growing in this field was being able to talk to others who've already started their journey. So with that, I'll turn it back to Van.
And with that, Van, we'll turn it back to Scott.
Thank you, Van. Thanks, everyone. It's great to hear the diverse experiences that you've had and to realize you don't have to be a lawyer. You can be a lawyer. You don't have to be a techie. You can be a techie. You can come into privacy from a variety of different fields, different experiences. You can start out in another career and move into privacy, or you can start out in privacy. So that's kind of exciting to hear. So I want to get into some more specifics with our panelists, and hopefully this will be more of a conversation. Cheryl mentioned some things you can do if maybe you're a graduating senior, or let's say you're in human resources or contracts, and you're interested in privacy, but you haven't really had any experience in privacy. So the mentorship option, I think, is a great idea. You send an email, contact one of us, contact another privacy officer, either at UC, Google, the private sector, any other organization that you're interested in. But I want to ask our panelists, what else would you recommend that maybe a new graduate or mid-career professional do to take advantage of some of the opportunities in privacy? Pegah.
Volunteer for stuff. Offer to help people. Like Thea said, and like I said, sometimes just being curious and asking a lot of questions will help you a little bit. But the fact of the matter is that at least in higher ed, the privacy people that you know are very, very under-resourced, significantly under-resourced. Liz, how many privacy folks did you say you all have? Privacy lawyers?
Oh, yeah. So I'm part of a team of, we have about 30 plus privacy lawyers, like globally.
And how many privacy professionals do you have?
It's several hundred, like
Yeah.
across the organization. And, Google more generally is, we're probably fairly unique, just given like the size of the company. It's, the legal department is like a large law firm. So
Sure.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Whereas here at a very large university with 40,000 students, 30,000 employees, touching every single part of the world, right? We have research going on everywhere in the world. We have students from everywhere in the world. We touch every part of the world. We have one person dedicated to privacy. One. That's even less where in Irvine, it's even less, right? We just don't have the resources that we need in higher ed. So if somebody comes to us and offers to help with something, if somebody says, can I help you with your website? Can I help review a document? Can I draft your first draft of a policy? Can I help you with a database? Can I help you even just manage your own records? Whatever help I can get from somebody. We had somebody that said, we had a student that was helping out in our umbrella office. And they said, I'm a good design person. And we said, hey, in your free time, can you design a poster? Great, right? Even the little things, whatever you have to bring to get you in touch with a privacy person, they're going to give you things to do. There's plenty for us to do. But so there's volunteering and there's mentorship. And I tell people that are more connected with folks out in the community, there are lots of nonprofits that have no privacy help. So just offering to help them, hey, can I write you a privacy statement for your website or something like that? Those kinds of things help you not only build up your chops, but also have something to put on your resume.
Thank you, Pegah. Van, looks like Van and
Yeah, so I will take this from another angle as well. My undergraduate degree is in classics, and my graduate degree is in marketing, finance, and entrepreneurship. And it turns out that I haven't yet run into a field or an area where privacy isn't like critically important. And I might go out there and actually just start off by saying, if you love privacy, hold on to that love, but also think about an industry or a career that you love, right? And really kind of orient yourself that way. So, my wife is a digital marketer, and people come to her all the time to kind of ask questions about GDPR. She would never think about herself as being a privacy person, right? But her team basically, doesn't know. And if she actually cared about privacy, she would probably spend more time engaged, and that would be one path into it for her. Similarly, you could be, on the accounting side and really kind of concerned about, financial regulations and privacy through that realm. So I would just basically ask people to kind of think very broadly about the types of industries that they care about, the types of functions, and look for ways to kind of embed their love for privacy through that route.
thanks, Van. Cheryl.
Yeah, I'm going to echo both Van and Pegah's statements. I too would welcome anyone who's interested in working in the privacy or security space to join our team as an intern or a volunteer. In fact, we do a concerted effort to hire a number of students to join the security office. And interesting enough, we're not solely looking for computer scientists, by the way. So just FYI, you have to have a CS degree to join our team. In fact, we are looking for people who are quite creative, and certainly creative in other areas like data science or privacy or legal, and believe it or not, psychology. There's an element, a human element to many of what we're saying so far. And bringing individuals with a very diverse background into our space and allowing them to be very creative, because as I said, there aren't a lot of strong playbooks that define exactly what we have to do and how we do things. Just makes our programs that much stronger. So I truly echo Pegah's comments, and Van as well. If you're interested, certainly contact us and let's see what we can do. I suspect that there's a lot of possibilities out there for anyone, regardless of your experience or background to date.
Thank you, Cheryl. Liz.
Yeah, I would just a big +1 to all of that. And I would just underscore a point that was sort of raised, which is that privacy is a really large space. So in addition to touching like a bunch of verticals, as Van kind of raised, like it's really all kind of sectors of our economy and society. There's also a bunch of different roles, compliance, legal roles, product engineering, just to name a couple, depending on whether you have a technical background or not. So I think kind of doing your research, talking to people, leveraging mentors, and getting kind of an understanding of that landscape is important, and thinking about where you're kind of interested in adding, value. Because I think the roles do differ, quite a bit, sort of depending on what angle you're coming at it from. And, all of those aspects to it, I think, are really important. One just kind of tactical suggestion, in the privacy space, there's also professional organizations. So many folks may have heard of, IAPP, International Association of Privacy Professionals, which is probably kind of the major one that spans the kind of privacy community, and they do certification. So, that could be a useful way to sort of signal to like prospective employers that you have a strong interest in the space and some expertise. So in addition to kind of, I think the mentoring piece is really important. Volunteering is sort of huge. A few other ideas, as well as, taking classes and, just getting sort of as much exposure as you can, I think is also helpful.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz. One of the next questions we wanted to address was, because there is, if you go to some of these conferences, I've been to a couple of IAPP one conference, I guess, and some of the healthcare compliance conferences, you can see the field isn't as diverse as it could be. What can we do to increase the diversity of the field? I know we talked about some of the things we're recommending to people that want to enter the field, but as privacy officials or people who are already working in privacy, what do all of you think we can do to open doors? Go ahead, Van, and then Thea.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I would start off, by echoing something I believe that Cheryl said and just building on it a little bit. I think individually for all of us, in addition to kind of providing jobs, I think that mentorship, sponsorships, and apprenticeships are all kind of really critically important here. I think, keeping an eye out for opportunities to sponsor folks and to say, hey, here's a project. I may not be mentoring you, but I'm just basically kind of putting some faith in you that I believe that you can do this, and playing matchmaker is huge. If there is an opportunity to really kind of work with somebody closely on your project, I think that that's something that we can kind of do, especially for folks that are folks that may not look like you. They may, if you're a male, they may not be a male, they might be a woman. And I think that sponsorship and mentorship for folks that are different than you is actually critically important in this role. And then I would say for the folks that are actually coming into here that are underrepresented in some way, just keep in mind that from a resiliency perspective, a lot of industries in a lot of fields, you're not going to necessarily see people that look like you, right? And that means that sometimes you have to go outside of your organization in order to kind of find folks that will allow you to kind of stay there. And so those, kind of trade associations become really important, right? And trying to find folks that kind of engage with you in that way. And then to the degree that my experience, especially with, Black kids coming into the stuff, but I suspect that this is the same with folks coming from all different sets of backgrounds. That imposter syndrome is strong, right? And there's so many people that come in feeling like, well, either one, I can't do it, or two, I'm a fraud. And, everybody feels that way, or so many people feel that way. Push yourself beyond that. I think I got cut off, and apologies. I just wanted to kind of say, try to basically ignore that voice in your head telling you that you're a fraud. You're not. You're amazing. We need your talent. We need your skill. We need your passion. Please come in, seek out the mentors, seek out the folks to provide apprenticeships, and seek out the sponsors.
Great, thank you, Van. Great advice. And I think Thea had her hand up.
Right. I kind of have a simpler approach, I think, looking at it from our point of view as current privacy officials. I think we can make sure that when we communicate our privacy priorities and things like that, we make our privacy programs accessible. Let's use plain language. And so it's not so much legalese. So people feel like, oh, I can see what you're doing. I can see a place for myself there. And I would encourage people to come in and claim a space. Privacy programs are only effective if we're able to make our notices meaningful to our audience. We can throw up a bunch of language, but that's not as useful as notices that really mean something, that tell the members of the public what we're doing. And our notices are better if we have more diverse input, because we're trying to reach a diverse audience. We're serving a diverse audience. So we want to really focus on, are we asking enough people? Are we asking people to review our statements, giving us input? And what about the notice we send out didn't make sense to you? Is there a part that is confusing to you? Or in my case, English wasn't my first language. So I really advocate for plain language in our communications. It's easier for me to understand plain and direct communication. And if we work on making our programs easily accessible will attract more people to the program. We attract more people to being interested and curious about privacy. We will have more types of people, and the diversity will come if we make ourselves and our programs more accessible. It is sometimes, there is that little barrier, our little self-doubt, and I think Van like hit it on the head that, well, I don't know if I will fit in. Will these people want to work with me? Can I keep up? But absolutely every single person that is working in privacy, if you see them in a higher ranking position, they just started working before you. They got in line earlier. So I got out of college earlier. So it was the early 80s when I graduated. So I started working. So that's why I'm sitting in that box on the org chart. I've been here longer, I've been doing it longer, and there's nothing absolutely that distinguishes me from anybody else who's interested and anybody else who wants to learn this program and get there. So you just have to understand that maybe there's less diversity in those top boxes because those were the people who were standing in line, got tapped on the shoulder, who fell into the job, and who just happened to be there at the time, or have been working longer than you. This field is not going to look the same in 5 years or in 10 years. So just understand it will change, and you can choose to come in the door and be part of the change. And all of us would be so excited to have people who are interested and to learn and to find ways to contribute.
Thank you, Thea. Looks like Cheryl. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, I was just reading a comment in the chat box, and it certainly resonates with me. I will probably state the obvious. As a CISO for a large organization, I attend a fair number of conferences and meetings, and I'm often the only person or woman of color in the room. And it's been that way for years, literally. Interesting enough, we're working in a time and in a field where there is a significant shortage of talent. It's amazing, how much we need versus how little is in the pipeline. And so when I talk to underrepresented individuals who are interested in these fields, security or privacy or something akin to both, I try to impress upon them how important their coming into this pipeline is to all of us. We need them. No, let me say it differently. We desperately need them. And so anyone who's interested, I would say, do your level best to put away your fears. We are in desperate times for talent. Nearly every branch of the organizations that I can think of, federal, state, public, private, are all seeking to bring people into this field, these fields, security and privacy. You've heard us say this before, and it's worth repeating. We need you. We desperately need you. So one piece of advice is to realize that, yes, you may feel like you're the invisible person in the room. Yes, some people may not believe that you belong there, let's be honest. But the reality is, we need you. We desperately need you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any other comments on how we can make the field more diverse?
Really quickly, I'll say so. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
One thing I do want to say is that the broader privacy field is a little bit more diverse than the higher ed privacy field. The higher ed privacy field, much like the rest of higher ed employment or staff side, is much more female weighted. But the broader privacy community, like in the IAPP, it's not even, it's not equal, but it is a little bit more diverse. Almost every single country in the world has a privacy law, and they have privacy lawyers and privacy practitioners in all of those spaces. So sometimes attending those events, those conferences, if you can, even or just joining the IAPP and reading some of their articles or participating in their online events or their freebie events, is helpful because the field is just a little bit more diverse, and you can, touch base with people that are coming from completely different countries, completely different walks of life, completely different backgrounds, and you'll gain different kinds of experiences. So I would urge anybody that has just been focused in the higher ed space to branch out just a little bit.
Thanks, Pegah. Liz?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in to kind of underscore Cheryl's point, something I think we've all raised about just the really critical importance of focusing on increasing representation, and the point that it really, I think, results in better decision making and better outcomes when we have representation. And I think for those of us that are kind of later in our careers, really focusing in on it and figuring out kind of what concrete steps we can take in helping support building a pipeline in our hiring, and thinking about for those of us in the legal space where we're using outside counsel and making sure that we have diverse teams. I think there's a lot of kind of specific actions that that help kind of support this goal. And just a quick plug, because it's something that I'm volunteering with. At Google, we have it's called the Google Summer Institute, but a program for rising 2Ls from underrepresented areas to do an internship at Google for a short period of time, and then there's a placement at a law firm. So kind of seeking out programs like that, volunteering for those that have the opportunity, to do so, I think is really important.
They're excellent advice. And I did want to address some of the comments in chat. Maria Rivera included a link, and I'll try and put this in the chat for everybody, to the SANS organization's scholarship for BIPOC, especially BIPOC individuals. If I can, I'll put it in the overall chat link. And then one of the things that came up, and I apologize if I can't find who made this comment. It looks like a couple folks. The conferences themselves cost money typically, and even the membership fees for organizations like the IAPP or the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics, or some of these organizations. So that's something I think we can do as privacy professionals and security professionals. We can advocate within these organizations for scholarships, for opportunities for people to attend, if they don't have the funds. A lot of us, once you get into these fields, then your employer pays for it. And it's kind of this cycle where the people who have employers who will pay for these conferences are the ones who can go. So I think that's something we can do to hopefully change that. But I'll put in the information about the SANS conference in the chat. So one of the things I also wanted to talk about, since we have a little bit of time, is the privacy field in general, not just in terms of careers, but in terms of data privacy. And grassroots data privacy. So for folks who maybe aren't in the privacy field or aren't privacy officials, wanted to get the advice of all of you for what we can do to not just keep our data safe, but to advocate for the protection of personal data. I think a lot of people sometimes feel overwhelmed with the privacy protections. If you're clicking through websites, for example, and I need to block these ads or need to click on this particular radio button to make sure my data is safe, but it becomes overwhelming after a while. So what are some things that we can do to advocate for maintaining the privacy of personal data, and also in our own lives to keep our data safe?
Can I start? One of the things that I think would be extraordinarily beneficial, and I think this is happening to a degree, but maybe just a little bit more is needed, is for the privacy officers to share these concepts that we learned early on, like privacy by design, or some of the attributes that one should be thinking about as we're dealing with privacy. To say it differently, as a security officer, I'd like to say that security should be part of your DNA. As a privacy officer, I think the same should be said, that as you think about data, it should be part of your DNA. It should be part of your thinking, your underlying thinking. And the way to get there is really to influence human behavior, to teach them, to share with them, to tell them the risks and the benefits of dealing with certain types of data. And that's really about training and ongoing training in my book. So I think, again, trying to make privacy more part of the culture of that we speak of might help us address some of the issues that we see when things don't go as well as we expect.
Thanks, Cheryl. Pegah, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's very important for people to kind of understand the issues and grapple with them. I think that's one of the problems that we're seeing. Like I said, privacy is kind of a new field. If you look back 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't a robust field that you could have a full career in. Information security, we are where information security was 15 years ago, right? It was still kind of a new thing. People weren't sure what a CISO was. You kind of knew, but you kind of sort of didn't. You know, wasn't entirely clear. That's where we are with the privacy field right now. But we are professionalizing. We are becoming a little bit more standardized across the industry, and certainly the GDPR spurred that along quite a bit. So what I do find, though, is because of this rapid shift in forward progress, society, most people, even really smart people, even well-educated people, don't understand the issue, don't understand the nuances of the issue, don't understand the ecosystem in which their data live. They don't understand their digital footprint fully, or their digital profile fully. So I tell people, get yourself educated, pay attention to the issue. When you hear about it, when you read about it in the newspaper, attend one of the Privacy 101 workshops, which my campus puts on. They're free and available to anybody, anywhere. Attend those and learn a little bit about the issue. I think that's a really important thing to do in order to help people advocate for themselves and for us to be better advocates. The other thing I wanted to touch on in what you were saying, Scott, is that similar to the legal profession, you can go to law school, but you don't have to be, a court-going litigator. Like you don't have to be that person. There are so many types of different lawyers that never set foot in court, that don't work for law firms, that don't even practice law necessarily. There are lots of different branches. So you can go to law school and do lots of different things. Same thing with privacy. It has so many different branches. You can go to law school and be a privacy person, but you can also be a community organizer. You can be an advocate. You could be a super technical data person. You could be a data scientist. You could be a security person. There are lots of sort of privacy adjacent fields, as I like to call them, that all sort of have to work hand in hand in their little overlapping Venn diagrams to meet the needs of privacy. So if you are concerned about the issue, there are lots of privacy adjacent ways to go about it, but it's also very important to make sure that you educate yourself and educate your children. Definitely make sure that they understand what's happening with their uses of technology, with their uses, what's collected about them, and the risks that they face. So, sorry, I went a little off topic with what you were specifically asking, Scott, but those are just things that popped in my head as you were talking.
No, that's great advice. Van, go ahead.
I really still feel bad kind of weighing in here in areas where clearly it's not my thing. So I'll speak to it, much more from a consumer perspective. Where I think, we have the options to go out there and learn, prioritize, participate, and advocate. And I think on the learning side is really just basically taking advantage of so many more privacy resources that you kind of see, so many more articles around this type of stuff being published every single day. And I think the prioritization piece is that you all have a very limited amount of time in your lives, like we all do. Are there issues that you kind of care more about because they affect you a lot, right? You're a big Google user, sorry, Liz, right? Learn more about what Google is doing and, spend your time on areas that impact you, and then go out there and figure out, how do you participate? And some of that participation might be, in trade groups. Some of it might be, going out there and seeing if there's something that, Google offers for you to volunteer, serving on a user advisory group, but whatever you can kind of find, look for ways to engage so that you can kind of increase that feedback loop through engagement with other people that are in that space. And then that final thing is in that way of advocacy. I think as a user, there's at least two ways that I can think of, and I'm sure this group can think of even more ways. One way is just, everybody has a voice, whether or not it's on Twitter and whether or not it's on your blog. And if you want to really kind of learn about this stuff, one great way of doing it is kind of figuring out how do you put pen to paper and talk about an issue, right? The second way is actually through legislation. That's an area where, I think this stuff is rapidly evolving. We're well behind Europe in the way that we still think about data privacy. And we all have the ability to go up there and kind of call our state legislators, call our federal legislators and say, hey, we care about this issue and you can use your voice in that way as well.
Thanks, Van. That's great advice. I did want to point out in the chat, there was a question about other webinars or resources. Pegah has an excellent presentation. I've attended it on what you can do to protect your data, Privacy 101, and she put a link in the chat. There is also a panel presentation on social media and privacy that's this Friday at noon. It's part of the UC Data Privacy Week program, and I will put a link in the chat as well to that. And then, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt the other folks that wanted to jump in on that topic. Well, I also wanted to allow our audience members to ask questions. So if you have a question for any of the panelists or just about privacy careers or privacy in general, if you could put a question in the chat or in the Q&A, we have a couple minutes. If you want to ask a question, you can always reach out to us as well. If the panelists are okay with it, putting their email addresses in the chat, or you can reach out to the privacy office and I can get in touch with panelists if need be. But if you have questions now, we'd love to hear them.
Scott, while we're waiting, I'll jump in on the bandwagon of not feeling like you belong or feeling like you're an imposter in the space. To this day, I continue to feel that, even though I've been in the field for a while now. And like Cheryl said, sometimes I am the only woman in the room. Sometimes I'm the only non-European person in the room, and I'm the youngest person in the room. So I have sort of those three strikes. I've been called kiddo more times than you can imagine, including earlier this month. So I get it. It's very hard, and some days I do doubt myself greatly, and then there are other days where I work with this amazing group of people and they put me back right. So find the right group of people that are supportive and that'll have your back and will help you lift your voice.
Cheryl,
I want to piggyback on that. I think one of the greatest advantages that I have working in higher education is higher education. We have so many networks of colleagues that we can turn to, cry on their shoulders, seek advice, share advice. It's an amazing industry. And I've always felt that even as a CISO or informally as a CPO or Chief Privacy Officer, I had an advantage over my peers in that I had a community. And so I strongly support Pegah's last comment regarding, find that person that you can talk to. Let's for the sake of this discussion, we're strongly encouraging you to join the privacy field. In my case, I'd also strongly encourage you to look at the security field. But let's suppose you choose neither field. One way or the other, building a network, a solid network, is going to be, I think, your advantage going forward, regardless of what you choose. So I strongly support Pegah's last comment. It's really important to, again, keep that network in mind.
Excellent. There's a question in the Q&A about what baseline knowledge do we have before entering the privacy field? Books to read, laws to study, just want to understand the skill set you are looking for.
Yeah, I'll go. I'll talk
Yeah,
about this. I
sure.
think I apologize to any HR folks that are here or anybody that writes these things, but I think the fact that they put JD as like the absolute you must have for every single privacy thing is sort of lazy job description writing. What I think most privacy positions, unless you're looking at a privacy law position, like Liz, that's different. But for things like privacy officer, privacy analyst, those sorts of things, they're really looking for critical thinking, right? And the shorthand for that, anytime somebody's looking for critical thinking, the shorthand is they'll put JD. Right, but I wouldn't put too much on that. They're really looking to make sure you can understand and digest a lot of dense material, that you're able to view things from an interdisciplinary way. That's incredibly important because you're going to be talking to totally non-technical Luddites all the way up to your CIOs. You're going to talk to faculty members that are experts in the thing, building the thing, to administrative assistants. You're going to be talking to students, you're going to be talking to children, whatever it is, it's going to be, it has to be interdisciplinary. You have to have an understanding of the technology, of the data, of psychology, like somebody said earlier. So I think those are really the important things as opposed to just JD.
That's a great point. I'd also add years of experience. I've seen privacy official job postings where the minimum is 10 years. And as we know, this is a new field. The field itself has been around for maybe 20, 30 years, but a lot of data privacy laws are very new. So 10 years of experience may not do you as much good as it does in other careers or fields. Any other comments on that question? Liz, maybe I can put you on the spot for a second if you don't mind. I know we're kind of in our higher ed bubble. Is there any specific advice in terms of private sector or companies like Google that you might give to applicants or to people writing job descriptions for that matter?
I think that Pegah raised some great points, and there is, just to underscore another theme, like there's just so many different opportunities in the privacy space. Like the legal area is just one of many. We need folks with lots of different backgrounds, engineering, product backgrounds, marketing, et cetera, like really across kind of the spectrum, there's things that you can do. So I think that certainly critical thinking skills resonates with me. I think that to the extent you have an opportunity to gain exposure, to sort of the technical side. So I always joke that if I knew what I was, going to do, 15 years later, I would have taken like a computer science class, as an undergraduate, or had like, there's many more classes now than when I was in school. So like getting that technical background so that you have, I'm not a coder. I don't know that anyone here actually is, but having like fluency, I think, in the technology is really important no matter what role you're playing. So I think that's something that I would sort of raise. And I think it's definitely something useful when we're looking, to hire.
Excellent. It looks like Pegah and then Van, and then we have another question.
Yes, this is probably for more the mid-level folks that are looking to either get into the privacy space or change their position. Let me tell you what, COVID was the right time for me because a lot of those foundational courses that were always taught sort of in the middle of the day in person were all of a sudden online. So I was able to take a bunch of coding classes, a bunch of computer science classes. I took a bunch of data science classes since COVID started to sort of learn more and get more expertise from those privacy adjacent areas. So if you're a mid-level person, take classes now while things are still online before everybody goes back in person.
Good idea. Man. So, I just will say I kind of am a recovering software engineer. But I think I started off by saying this. I really do feel like there is, no field that's not really kind of deeply engaged in this area. And, if you were in a field, whether or not it was software engineering or, if it was, something completely different, if it was kind of in storytelling, there is definitely ways for you to kind of get engaged And while I have no real kind of feedback around here's a book or a course that will help you, I will say that I have a former colleague, who wrote this book called The Hype Machine. And, it was really just about how, social media data is being used to kind of do everything from kind of starting wars to kind of manipulating elections. This is Sinan's at MIT right now. So I think that that's kind of one that's more of an inspirational thing about, why it's so important to kind of care about this. And then I think the other one is a book called Everybody Lies, right? And it's another way of kind of just going out there a little bit funnier, just kind of looking at, how we use data, how much data is collected about us individually, as well as how much data is kind of collected about society. And again, nothing actionable in terms of making you a better data privacy person, but certainly both of them are kind of inspiring to want to learn more about it and to kind of realize just like what is happening in the world today.
Great point, Cheryl.
Yeah, I was thinking as I was listening to my colleagues speak, if I were, walking my journey all over again, I think I'd spend a lot more time understanding human behavior. I am a recovering coder as well, developer, computer science major, et cetera, et cetera. And all these skills have served me quite well. But today I am so interested in understanding how people think and why they do what they do. And part of my questioning has to do a lot with social media. Why did you click here? What made you look at this website and see or read what you saw as something legitimate? I'm so curious how people think more so now than ever before. And so I would suggest that, there are different ways to enter into the privacy field. I think you're hearing that from all of us. I don't know if there is a prescribed way that would guarantee your entry, but what I'm sensing, at least just by hearing a colleague speak today, is that there are so many paths. Choose the one that feels the best, the most comfortable for you.
It's great advice, Cheryl. I want to address one question that was in the Q&A. It's, what do you think are the privacy and security impact of the metaverse in higher ed, and how can we prepare for it in terms of new careers or tracks that we can look into? So with the metaverse, how will that impact us, and what kinds of career fields can we prepare for, or can students prepare for as the metaverse takes over? Van, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start on this one, and I'll kind of take up where Cheryl left off. So I would say that, the challenge prior to the metaverse is that there's so much kind of unregulated data being collected today, right? And, if you kind of look at what we're doing on the social side, so much of this is kind of behavioral targeting data. And I think we kind of, care a whole lot about, well, hey, what data do they have about me in terms of searches that I've gone out there and engaged in? But, what about things around how long you've kind of looked at a certain ad, right? Or, whether or not you kind of click on something more times on Thursdays versus some other times. So there's a lot of this kind of generative data that happens. So much of that is being driven by both design. So much of it is actually being driven by, cognitive science in terms of kind of like looking at people's habitual behavior. And so I think the challenge in the metaverse side is that we're going to go beyond just, what people are clicking on and spending their time on scrolling, to people being able to kind of generate data around eye movement, right? And they're getting a much deeper kind of insight into your brain because they can actually see, like, you're spending more time looking at this thing, right? Or how quick your reaction time, is to things. And, my fear here is that we've only really kind of scratched the surface, and the way that we're kind of actually are thinking about data, that we're actually, thinking about privacy around and thinking about regulation around. And to the degree that you can kind of learn more about the cognitive sciences that are behind it, around the user experience design that's behind it, and the marketing that's behind it, because all three of those areas are really kind of driving the revolution in data collection. I think that's another way of kind of getting yourself prepared.
Excellent. Any other questions? I know we're getting into the lunch hour, so we're probably going to wrap things up. Any other questions from the audience or any comments from the panelists before we wrap it up? All right. Well, thank you so much. I really want to thank the panelists. This has been really insightful, even for me as someone who works in privacy. This has been very insightful. And I did want to address it. There were some questions with the link, and I guess some people had trouble logging in. So we did record this. If you talk to people who couldn't get in, we will post the link on the privacy office website, or you can contact me and I will provide a link to the recording. So sorry about it. We had 100 people register, so more than that, and about 55 that were able to get in. So we'll post the video. And I want to thank all of you for your interest in privacy. As everyone mentioned, this is a career field that's expanding and growing, and we need you and we need your perspective. So please reach out to us if you need mentorship or you have any questions. We'd be happy to help. All right. Well, thanks, everybody, and happy Data Privacy Week.